everyone, welcome to the Other View Pod. We are here with the amazing Zuby, and everyone knows him. He's a worldwide phenomenon. He's known for obviously the music industry, now cultural, commentator. He's an icon, and we're so pleased to have him here today. We've known for a few years, and we're finally actually meeting for the first time in person.
We are.
Right? Dubai's amazing. I was
Yes,
telling,
we are.
right?
Yeah.
Ian too. So it's funny, we're saying how Ian and I also have known each other for over a decade, and we just met in Dubai for the first time. So we're so happy to have you with us.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the introduction.
Thank you. And so much has changed on the landscape. You were born in the UK, right?
That's right.
Okay, great. And you have your background is Nigerian and British. Fantastic. Are both your parents Nigerian?
That's right.
Okay, fantastic. And so you had the ability to be exposed to Nigerian culture and the Western culture, if I'm not mistaken, right, growing up?
And Middle Eastern.
And Middle Eastern too?
I grew up in Saudi Arabia.
You grew up in Saudi Arabia?
Beautiful
5
place.
years old, right?
Beautiful place.
Yeah, I remember actually reading that about you. How old were you when you moved there?
1.
Okay, so for your formative, years, you were actually...
All my earliest memories begin in Saudi.
Wow.
Yeah, I went to school there from kindergarten until 5th grade.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so you speak Arabic?
Sadly not. I wish I did. I wish I did. The school I went to, they actually only taught Arabic to the Arabic students.
Mm.
So if you were a student
Fascinating.
from, it's really stupid in hindsight.
Yeah.
So if you're a student from, Jordan, Syria, Egypt, whatever, you'd get Arabic lessons.
Hmm.
But if you were from UK, USA, Canada, other Western nations, you didn't. And it didn't become an option until 6th grade. And I left for boarding school in the UK after 5th grade. So sadly, I hate to say that I lived in Saudi Arabia for as long as I did, and I speak absolutely minimal Arabic.
Well, you can definitely learn still, right?
I can still learn.
Okay.
I'm working on Spanish first.
Very smart.
And now you live here, so I mean, you're immersed in Arabic culture. Yeah.
Hey.
Awesome.
I'll see what I can do.
So, what was it like for you? Because I was born in the U.S. and I have, both my parents are born in Iran, and they came to the U.S. at an early age. I'm sure similar to your parents as well, right? Your father was a doctor, I believe.
Yep.
Right? Is a doctor? Sorry, he's
Over
still
50
practicing. Amazing. And your mom is a teacher.
No, my mom actually was a journalist for a long time.
Hey.
Yeah, she actually used to be a news reporter on TV in Nigeria
Incredible.
way back in the day. And then even in Saudi Arabia, she worked as a journalist. She used to write for one of the local papers there.
That's
So
great.
that's what her kind of trade is.
So, like for me, and Ian was born in Malaysia.
Yeah.
But he's practically American.
Practically.
Like, right? It's like he knows the culture. It's like it's amazing. And so for me, it's probably similarly to you. I was born and raised in America. I consider myself American, right? You consider yourself British, right?
Right.
And I was still straddling these two cultures, right? Being ethnically Iranian, Persian, and also being Western. So you similarly had an experience where you had obviously British culture, Western culture, and then African and also Middle Eastern culture. So was that like ever challenging for you to navigate?
No.
It doesn't
Great.
have to be.
It's a huge
I love
blessing.
it.
No, I think it's a huge blessing. I'm very grateful that from a very young age, I've just been exposed to a range of different countries, cultures, people of different backgrounds, faiths, all of that. I think actually it's helped to shape and develop my perspectives and worldview in a way that I'm constantly amazed by how many people care about the things that I have to say, but it's a lot of people at this point, and I wouldn't have the viewpoints and perspectives and ability to articulate them that I do if I had kind of just grown up in a more narrow place.
Like
Yeah.
cloistered environment, or like some
Yeah.
people, they don't even leave their hometowns, right?
That's right.
True.
Like a lot of people, like maybe not so much in Europe or whatever, but in America in particular, a lot of people are just sort of like they never leave America.
Yeah, sure. I mean, most people around the world, a lot of people don't have the means
That's true.
to travel very
Yeah.
much, but even a lot of people who do have the means choose not to.
Yeah.
So I don't know what percentage of the world's population has ever left their home country, but it might not be most.
Mm-hmm.
It could well be the case that most of the 8 billion people in this world have never left
That's absolutely
the
true.
country.
That's
they
true,
live in.
yeah.
That is probably the situation. I think even in the U.S., which is obviously a highly developed country, I think only about 30% of Americans have
That's right.
passports.
Yep.
So, most Americans never have and never will leave the USA.
It's a wild statistic.
And that, by definition, will limit your perspective and your
Yep.
worldview, because I've never come across anybody anywhere or from anywhere who has not had their perspective widened
Yeah.
by traveling.
Exactly. I mean, I've lived pretty much everywhere my whole life, right? I move around, and there's a meme that I've never left Malaysia, which is really hilarious. But obviously, I move around, and you get to know new people, you get to see their perspectives, and you come to the realization eventually. And some people are going to hate me for saying this. Multiculturalism can work.
Absolutely.
It can work.
I mean,
Just not in the forced
right now we're in probably the prime example.
Exactly. I mean, this place is more
Fine.
multicultural than anywhere I've ever been, right? I've been to Rome, I've been to Singapore, I've been to Tokyo, all these places, and none of them match up to, Dubai, right? It's got this high standard of living, everything's amazing, but everybody gets along.
Yeah.
And I think you're absolutely right. I want to call it cultural homogeneity. Culturally homogeneous. It has to do with not traveling. But I think now also with the advent of AI and tech and social media, right? Even people who haven't necessarily left their homes or their home country, there is the ability to see different perspectives. I've noticed Netflix has more international options, small things like that, but nothing compares to actually getting up and traveling, right?
No, there's no substitute for firsthand experience. It's like a lot of things. I mean, I can read all the books I want about parenting and talk to so many people I know that are parents and do all of this research and studies on parenting, but until I'm actually a parent, I'm not going to know exactly what it's like. So traveling is like that. You could sit there and you could read encyclopedias. You could go on Wikipedia and research different countries and read about it. You could go on Instagram and look at photos, and you could even go on Google Street View and look around the roads and whatever, but it's not going to be the
It's
same.
not the same thing.
It's
You have
just
to immerse
going
yourself
to the
in it.
place
Total
and
absorption.
experiencing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the same is true of everywhere. I wish more people around the entire world would travel more.
Yeah.
And I don't say that because, I don't know, I think some people think of traveling in sort of a shallow way.
Yeah, they think of it as being like tourist or something.
Yeah,
But that's not
yeah.
what you want. That's not the real experience. You have to immerse yourself totally
Yeah.
in order to eliminate those biases
Yes.
that you have of other people. I mean, for instance, just example, people think, watching Hollywood movies, they think that Russians are all drunkards and they drink vodka all day. But that couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, every Russian that I'm friends with, they do not even touch the stuff. So it's like, okay, this is like the complete opposite of what I know of Russian people. Or, if you watch Hollywood movies, you would think they're all like, KGB Russian drunks. It's like
What it does is it gives you a higher resolution worldview.
That's right.
In
Yeah.
the same way
I love
that
that.
talking to different people does. We all have a view of the world. If we're honest, we all have a view of the world that's pretty inaccurate.
Yeah.
Because
Absolutely.
it can't be. There's about 200 countries. There's 8 billion people. We haven't met them all.
That's right.
We can't meet them all. We can't go everywhere. So we have we probably have a pretty high resolution view of people we personally know, our families and
Yeah.
our neighborhoods and the places we've grown up in and seen. But outside of that, it's different. It's increasingly lower resolutions the further you go from where you are. So the more people you meet, the more you communicate with people, the more you travel, the more places you see and the things you do, you just get a more and more accurate
Yeah.
vision. So I'm sure before you ever came to Dubai, you'll have some idea.
Yeah, a lot of bad impressions. I mean, a lot
Yeah,
that goes on the internet. A lot of propaganda against Dubai based on lies, essentially, by people who've never been here, never want to come here. They say that, and then I show them Dubai, and they're like shocked.
Yeah.
They're like, "What do you mean women have freedom here?" That's the biggest thing, right? What you mean women are safe here? Yes, women are very safe here.
It's the safest country, I think,
In the world,
It's the
literally in the world,
before
per capita.
Singapore even.
Yeah, the UAE is up there.
Singapore's
Yeah.
number 2 or
All of
something.
the Gulf
Yeah.
countries, all the GCC.
All the Gulf countries, yeah,
Very
even
safe.
Bahrain. Like most people haven't heard of it, but it is literally one of the safest
Bahrain
countries in
also,
the world.
yeah, absolutely.
Qatar. Yeah.
Yep.
Have you been to Saudi Arabia since you left?
I haven't been back since 2008,
Okay.
but I really look forward to going. Hopefully within the next year.
Let's all plan a trip.
Yeah.
Sure, why not?
I've never been. I want to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's been fascinating to see. Obviously, it's changed so much since you've been there, and even Dubai, right? I don't know how long you've been living
Oh,
here, but
yeah. The first time I came to Dubai, I was about 12.
okay, there you go.
So yeah, I came to Dubai like 25-ish years ago. So I've certainly seen the city change.
Wow,
Yeah.
night and day probably.
Yeah, massively. I just remember, I was living in Saudi Arabia the first time I came, and I just remember it feeling quite similar to some of the cities in Saudi. Like, I didn't notice much of a change, and all of this stuff that we can see out that window and all this,
Yeah.
none of this was here. So, yeah, it was definitely different.
You know, I want to talk about that actually. So regarding cultural things, right? You know, the Middle Eastern stability versus the Western culture, the Western decline, basically, right? Observing the current global landscape, you know, it's all these countries in the West are facing kind of upheaval. And you've talked about this a lot, and I want to talk about your background for the audience, for those who
Sure.
aren't familiar with your background and how you got into, you know, the music industry when you were actually at boarding school in the UK, I believe.
University.
University.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, great. So
Yeah.
we're going to get to that for sure. I want to know, you know, to what extent, I'd say, because you talked about this on your social media as well, what do you think it has to do with wokeness? Does that upheaval and kind of the decline, let's say, of the West have to do with wokeness and progressive values versus the Middle East, where it's more stable, more traditional conservative values? We don't see them facing the same issues that the West is facing. Do you have any commentary on that?
Ooh, I mean, that's a massive topic. Where do I even
No,
begin
you're
on
right.
that?
Heavy.
Look, if you look all through human history and you look around the world, something that's apparent to me is that humans, I think both as individuals and certainly collectively as nations, people struggle with balance. People struggle to, as a nation, as a culture, it's difficult to strike the right balance between many things, but let's just say in this case, liberalism and conservatism. Okay? It's entirely possible for a nation or a culture to be too conservative.
That's true.
If something is too, if it's too conservative
Yep.
and it's too restrictive, then individuals get squashed
Mhm.
and can even be oppressed in the extreme. And there's not going to be much entrepreneurship or innovation or creativity or art coming out of a culture where it's so narrow and everyone must conform to a very narrow thing and believe the exact same thing, and
Yep.
it's too crushing.
It's like the Third Reich
Yes.
Yeah, or North Korea, right?
or North Korea.
Yeah, there are nations that are too far that way in cultures, and there's examples of this all throughout history. And then it's also possible to go too far to the other extreme, where everything is just based on feelings and emotions, and there's no norms, and there's no expectations, and there's no guidelines or structure or morals or ethics or anything that's gluing people
Together. Yeah.
Right?
San
So-
Francisco is a
Exactly.
good example.
And
Weimar Republic back in the day, right?
and that pendulum can swing.
Yes.
And it does swing. It can even swing within the same nation. So I think that if I look at certainly the past decade, perhaps even the last couple of decades, the West, most of it anyway, swung too far in the progressive / liberal direction.
Yep.
And if you look at, let's look at the time period from, let's just say 2014 to 2024.
Massive difference.
Yeah, but that I'd say that decade was really almost defined in many ways culturally by the excesses of, let's just say, the left.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay? It wasn't the excesses of the right, no. It was just all of the goofiness that we might now call wokeness, that people before called, the social justice movement.
Yes.
Weird ideas around race and gender and sexuality and this. It all just got, just the lots of the Christian values not just being uprooted but also being flipped upside down, being inverted to the point where people are now believing and saying things which are the direct polar opposite of what just a few decades before was being promoted. It's interesting because if you look at the Middle East and you see where we are now, we are also having a liberalization that's taking place. We talked about Saudi Arabia here in Dubai, right? So these places are more liberal than they were even 5 years ago, let alone 10 years ago, let alone 50 years ago.
Women couldn't drive 20 years ago.
Women couldn't drive in Saudi until 2018.
Right, there you go.
Right? When I grew up in
7 years ago,
women couldn't drive.
Yeah.
Do you think it's safer now that women can drive?
I always have to resist trying to make a joke on that one. It's too easy. It's too easy. But I say, for the most part, that seems to be in a good direction. And you don't want it to go too far because then you're just going to end up with all the same problems that the West has had over the past decade. So there's a fine balance, I think, between liberalism and conservatism. And I think that because most people who are politically inclined tend to lean more one way than the other and often wear the label as a kind of badge and an identity, sometimes people don't think about and almost give enough credit to the fact that they both do exist and have to exist to some degree.
Yes.
If you talk to someone who's, considers themselves really, left-wing progressive and they wear that as their badge identity, they may not like to recognize the importance of the right, because they kind of see the right.
Everybody's the far right.
Yes, and then on the opposite end,
Yep.
you can have that the other way around, where, and even if they think of the term liberal, they think of like
They think of the most.
they think of the most
pink hair
yes,
covered
they,
in
exactly.
tattoos and
They
all
think
that.
of like the most extreme, goofy manifestation of it.
And this is where X comes in, right?
Yes.
Where Elon Musk wants to kind of, marginalize the people on the fringes and to have the people in the center, which is, I would say, 80% are normal, right? 80% of the normal people, they might be on that spectrum, but they're part of that normality.
Yes.
Whereas, the people on the fringes, the 10% here and the 10% there, keep them on the fringes.
But due to the power of the media, both traditional and social, you can make that 10% fringe look like
A lot
half of
larger.
it. Look like half of
80%.
Exactly.
I have to tell you, I have to commend X for this and Elon Musk for this. Anti-Semitism. Let's just talk about it.
Sure.
It's been a real big issue. Obviously there's, Islamophobia as well. Although it's interesting, most people don't know, most Muslims are actually Semites also, Arabs. They don't know the actual core definition of the word, right?
It's a bit of a weird term.
Right?
Yeah, it's a weird term, yeah.
It's funny. But on X specifically, the fact that Elon has given or Mr. Musk has given such a tremendous platform for free speech, which was previously squashed, we've been able to see a rise in the people who are on the fringes, so to speak, right?
On both the left and the right, it's not just,
Right.
a lot of the media will only focus on the insanity coming from, say, the far right, right? But they don't seem to talk about, like, the college campus protests, which are just as equally bad, if not perhaps
They're
even more so
funded,
because
yeah.
they're violent.
But they're showing. Wait.
It's okay.
Wait. You all right?
Oh, no. I was actually putting it on silent.
But they're showing their true faces.
Yeah.
They're actually showing who they are.
We know who they are, and they're unable to hide it, and we can see them for what they are, and it scares them, right? It scares the media to see that their narrative is being ripped apart, it's being ripped to shreds because of the truth is that people are fighting back, and that's where the whole nanny state idea falls apart. Like in Britain and in Europe in general. I mean, if you watch J.D. Vance's speech, he talks about how there's too much suppression of free speech because there's just no freedom in Europe, and they're doing it in the name of democracy, in the name of liberalism, but they're being tyrannical at the same time, right? And it's because they don't trust the people to be able to make that decision for themselves. But X is the proof that that you don't need to have that kind of policing. You don't need to have thought policing.
Vista Nexum, your 360-degree IT and marketing agency.
Okay, let's resume.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think of like how X has impacted the narrative? What are your perspectives on it? Because I mean you're an avid X user as much as I am. So what do you think?
Yeah, look, well, I'm very, very pro free speech, and I've been vocal in public about that for a long time.
Yeah.
And over the last 5 to 6 years in particular, maybe we could even extend it to 9 or 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Online, there had been increasing censorship going on.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Particularly from about 2016 until 2023, the window was just narrowing.
Yeah.
Initially, as it always happens with these things, they start by taking out the people who are on the most extreme fringes,
Mm-hmm.
and then they move in to people who are, kind of borderline, and then it keeps moving in.
And so Jordan Peterson finds himself getting canceled.
Exactly. I've had my Twitter account temporarily suspended before.
Yes, have I.
I don't even cuss.
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh no, he's too edgy, right? And then during the whole scamdemic period,
Yep.
the amount of censorship that took place there was just insane. So by Elon coming along and buying Twitter, which is now X, that hasn't just... I think of all the things that man has done and is doing, it could end up being the fact that move is the most long-term impactful thing.
Definitely.
I don't know, maybe if he really makes humanity a multiplanetary species,
That will be the biggest thing.
that may supersede it.
Yep.
But I think it's understated just how important it was for that to happen, because it doesn't just have an impact on X users, it has an impact on all the other big tech companies.
That's right. You see
And
Zuckerberg following everything
Yes.
that he does
And
in
it has an
lockstep.
impact overall on just the free flow of information, because if you have one place with hundreds of millions of users where people can share information and they can discuss and they can debate and they can watch videos and they can listen and they can, without the heavy hand of censorship, then it allows people to work out the truth.
Yes.
It allows the best ideas to win over worst ideas instead of just having some arbiter who's in the background and in the shadows determining what exactly can be said and what cannot. People also have to understand that free speech is a really messy thing.
It is.
It is.
It's a really messy thing, and there will
freedom's
be
expensive.
stuff that there's a
That's
cost.
expensive,
There's
yeah.
a cost, but it's cheaper than mass censorship,
Absolutely.
Of course.
right? So yeah, there's going to be some stuff out there. Look, I see stuff I dislike.
I see a lot of stuff
every
I
day.
just like.
And,
I
but
just-
that's been the case forever, right? That's
Yeah.
just part of being an adult living in the world. You're going to
Yeah.
see things you disagree with. You're going to hear opinions you dislike. You're going to find some of it upsetting. You might feel outraged by some of it. You might get mad at some of it. But ultimately, I'd rather live in a world where people are free to express those viewpoints
Yep.
and people can respond to it and react to it how they want,
Mhm.
than everyone is just being squashed down
That's right.
and looking over their shoulder, constantly worried that one day, not just that they'll lose their social media account, but maybe they'll lose their bank account.
Which
Maybe
we've
they'll
seen.
lose yes.
We've literally seen this.
Maybe they'll lose their job.
So let's talk about your entree into the music industry for you,
Sure.
right? At university, what was the spark, where you're like, I want to.
To be a rapper.
I mean, that's a cool ambition. Yeah.
Yeah,
You made it.
man, it's
Made it.
fun. So I've been a hip hop fan since I was in my early teens. So I went to boarding school at the age of 11. So I was still living in Saudi Arabia, but I went to boarding school in England from 11. And a lot of my friends in school, we all became rap fans. We're 12, 13 years old, listening to stuff that honestly we probably had no business listening.
I was just listening to Linkin Park.
Yeah, good part stuff.
Yeah.
And so through my teen years, I was definitely a big hip hop fan, but I'd never actually tried making my own music or writing lyrics or anything like that. And when I was in my first year of university, I actually wrote my first lyrics when I was stuck in an airport.
Okay.
So I was actually traveling from the UK to Nigeria,
Mm.
and I got stuck in the main airport in Paris. And my flight was delayed. I was by myself. I had nothing to do. And I just started jotting down some lyrics in like an exercise book. And it came kind of naturally to me. I was just like, and then I just would like record lyrics into my phone, just a cappella.
Yeah.
And then I started playing it to people, just kind of
I'm pretty good at this.
showing to my siblings, my cousins, and so on, and they're like, "Oh, okay, interesting. Zuby's rapping, cool." And then when I got back to university, I had a friend named Chris who lived on the same floor as me, and in his dorm room, he actually had like a very basic recording setup. So I used to go on a website called SoundClick.com.
Mhm.
This is pre-SoundCloud, and I used to just download beats from there. And then I would put my lyrics over the beats. I'd go in his
And then
room and we just
Like splice it. Right
yeah,
together.
I just go, I'd have the headphones
Yeah.
on and I'm kind of there like recording
Oh, that's the best.
Curtin as a sound booth.
That's literally the
And-
best. Yeah.
And I was the first song I ever made was a song called The Bad Man. And I made that song, then I made another track called Oh No, and then I made a song called Tonight. And I kind of had those three songs initially. And I would just kind of play them to anyone who'd listen,
Yeah.
attach them to emails and send BCC a whole bunch of people and send it to them. And I got some positive feedback to begin with. And then I just started taking it a little more seriously. The fourth song I ever wrote was a song called Step Into Me, which is still hasn't left my set list. And
Amazing.
that song, people really like that one. And so I was like, I'm going to shoot a music video for it. So
It's not been released yet.
Pardon?
It hasn't been released yet.
Oh no, it was released in 2006. Yeah. So it was my first music video, and it actually got some radio play. It got some. It was an old.
What did that feel like, having your first radio plays,
Oh, dude, it felt cool. It felt really cool.
Yeah? Like,
it was,
it feels like I've done this, right? And now you've like maybe realized that this is your career, right? That this could be your career.
that spark hadn't come yet. It was
Okay.
still very much hobby at this stage.
Okay.
When I realized I could do more with it was when people started buying my music.
Mm.
Awesome.
So this is back this is pre-streaming, this is pre-downloads.
Pre-SoundCloud,
This is
everything.
Yeah, this is when
For YouTube, even.
What year
CDs.
approximately?
2006, I put out my first release.
Yeah.
2006. So that's when everyone was still buying CDs.
Yeah.
Right.
And so eventually I had enough songs to make a little album. So when I was in my second year of university, I was 19 years old, put out my first album, which was called Commercial Underground. So it was just a eight song album.
Mm-hmm.
And it had that song on it, Step Into Me, which had the music video. And I remember I saved up some money, I pressed up 50 copies of it, and I sold them all in a week.
Wow.
And I was like,
Amazing.
oh, okay, it was mostly to friends and family,
Sure.
right? Not too
But
hard.
still, it's something.
And then I was like, cool, take that money, boom, make 100. Sold them all. 200, sold them all. All right, I'm going to make 1,000. So I went out and pressed up 1,000 copies. Maybe I sold like 50 of those, and then, I had boxes and boxes of CDs, and I was like, all right, I've kind of exhausted the people I personally know. Now I need to get my music out to strangers.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is the MySpace era, so I had 28,000 friends on MySpace. This is before.
That's huge.
Yeah.
That's really
So
huge.
I was like, all right, I'm going to try to promote and push my stuff on MySpace. Maybe I sold 3 or 4 albums on there, and I was like, I need a different way of doing this.
3 or 4.
And that's when I started going out on the street and talking to strangers and promoting and selling my music that way. And that was what set off the spark of I can.
You can do that. You can sell it.
I can do
I mean,
this.
and you still do that. I mean, I remember a video of you selling cats or something, right? And it's like, oh, that's so cool. And people buy them.
Yeah, so that became my bread and butter. I mean, long term, in the next 2 years, I ended up selling over 3,000 copies
Wow.
of my first album. So when I was in university, I never worked a job or anything. I actually
Fantastic.
helped keep
So you're
myself
an
afloat
entrepreneur.
well by just selling my CDs.
And it also teaches you how, you're not just a rapper, you're actually a self-made entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's a big thing that I think a lot of artists, not just rap artists, but musicians in general, are just not good at. They'll give it to a label and then they kind of get ripped off, right?
Well, it's two different mentalities and usually personalities. It's rare that great business people are great creators,
Yeah.
and it's rare that great creators are great business people, which is why most creatives have a whole team and apparatus around them to help with all the business side, from the
That's right.
marketing to the promotion to the finances and stuff.
Rack my head over this a lot of times because, we all happen to be both, right? And coming from also the analytical world, right? You see, and being a journalist myself previously, and as a journalist too, and all these think tanks and, the analytical minds, and it just drives me nuts sometimes how I'm like, look at all the access and how you can translate that into business opportunities. And most people I know just can't bridge that gap.
No.
And I was able to, we're able to, but I keep trying, look, here it is on a silver platter. And they still don't want to do it.
No, people have such different personality types.
Yeah.
And it can be, when you have a certain wiring, and I think it doesn't even matter what that wiring is, it can sometimes be frustrating and difficult to deal with people who have a very different mentality and even skill set. But that's just humanity, and I guess ultimately it's good that it's that way. Number one, because we don't want to all be just
You kind of just want to
saying,
Yeah.
and the whole world would fall apart, right?
It's just like Elon Musk, right? I mean, he's half engineer, half entrepreneur.
Uh-huh.
And that's the difference between him and most entrepreneurs and most engineers.
Yes.
He's a marriage of both.
Yes,
He's damn good at both.
for sure.
And it's the same thing with, a lot of successful people, really, they're also creators, right? A lot of success, like yourself, for example. But it's rare, though. It's very
Yeah,
rare.
it's rare, but we're all blessed with different personalities and different interests and different skill sets. And if you kind of think about it, the whole humanity would not function real well if it were not like that.
Yeah.
And
We need creators.
the economy wouldn't function well
We need entrepreneurs.
Yeah,
we need
because-
engineers. We need everybody, right?
Yeah,
They can all just be, one thing. Yeah.
No, absolutely not. The economy itself would not work.
Yeah.
Because everyone would be in the same lane. You need that whole spectrum for things to work. Like if you have a company or you work in a company, everyone does different things. It's not like everyone's got the exact same role. Otherwise, it just wouldn't work. So.
And I have automation, that's an AI that arguably is also diminishing those traditional jobs. So that's another whole topic of discussion.
It is.
I want to hear more about your progression in your career, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Your music career, how you became a top-selling musical.
I wish I were top selling. I can't claim that one. I'm not top selling.
Never did
Independently,
top
as a
list.
completely
Yeah.
100% independent DIY artist, I did well.
Yeah.
I did well. Not to compete with independent or major labels, but I sold over 30,000 albums out of a freaking backpack. Like not a lot of people.
That's amazing.
Not a lot of people can
Awesome.
say that they've
No.
done that. You know.
Selling back.
And that is something you can actually be proud of because it's not like you had a marketing team.
No, it was
You
really,
did
it was
the-
truly DIY. It was
Yeah.
truly DIY.
So then after that, labels I'm sure approached you to take you on, or did you decide to stay completely independent?
By the time there was any like interest, I was like, yeah, I don't need this. And I'm very ruggedly independent with almost everything that I do. I mean, I edited the first 150, 200 episodes of my podcast. Like that's how independent I am. I made my own website. So
Relatable.
yeah.
Relatable. Totally relatable.
I've had people, even when I come in to do interviews or something, and they're like expecting me to arrive with a team or
Yeah.
whatever. And this.
I assume you even run your own social media platform, right? I mean, you're for X.
No, every single social media post you see on any of my platforms was posted by me. And every DM reply, I've never used any AI. I don't have an assistant. If I've ever DM'd you, it was me. If you've ever read a tweet, it was me. All 200.
That is legit.
Now, I've had so many people be like, "Oh, I can write tweets for you. I can do that." I'm like, "No, go away."
It wouldn't be you.
I'm not giving anyone access.
There's no authenticity,
I'm
right?
not giving anyone access to my ex account. Like,
Yeah.
no, that's
for you.
that's all me.
We respect that,
Thank you.
honestly.
100% respect that. I mean, my ex account is just me.
Good.
I have like my best friend who occasionally finds videos for me to post.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Yeah.
You know, Zuby, I have to tell you, part of the reason why I had a record deal in the works, Atlantic Records, obviously, for pop singing a few years back. More than a few years back, whatever. I decided not to because, honestly, I didn't want to be home. And I didn't have, I wasn't going to go independent because I didn't have enough content, I wrote like maybe 2 songs,
Yeah.
okay? But I didn't want that life. And so that's why what you've done is so incredibly inspirational also for so many people out there. And it sets a standard. And I want to ask you also, considering that progression, you studied computers. What did you study in
Yeah,
computer science?
computer science.
Right?
Right?
So how did you kind of decide to shift over into the more cultural commentating? I guess what happened after the music industry? You just saw the change, right?
Yeah, so I went full time with my music in 2011. So I've been self-employed since October 2011.
14 years.
All right, yeah.
Yeah.
Long time.
Yeah, so 2011 to 2019, anyone who knew me just knew me as a rapper. That was it. It
Yeah.
was just all about the music grind, and merchandising. That's all I did. So anyone who discovered me in that period would have just known me as Zuby, rapper. Like, that's it. Coming into the mid-2010s, I certainly, in my personal life, in my own observations, that's when I started to notice the early mainstreaming of what we call wokeness.
Yep.
And I started to see weird ideas gaining a lot of traction and popularity in a way I'd never seen before. And I was like, something weird is going on here. And I'm talking to my family about it and friends and stuff like that. But I never thought to use my platforms to speak on it in any way. I didn't really feel that was necessary, nor that it was particularly my place. And then, due to a few circumstances, which I could get into,
Sure.
late 2018, I remember a very specific turning point where I was like, all right, I need to say something about this. And I did, and people really liked it.
Yeah.
So this is just on Twitter. I probably had like 18,000 followers at the time.
Mhm.
And I just started sharing my thoughts and views about some of the things that I was seeing going on
Yeah.
in my country and in the US, Canada, and so on. And it started to gain some traction. And then, of course, in February 2019, I had my now crazy, man, it's almost 6 years ago now.
It's insane.
It's crazy. 6
More
years
than a
ago.
decade.
That was the deadlift tweet.
Yep.
The infamous deadlift tweet.
Yes, I
Yeah.
want to talk about that.
That's right.
February 26, 2019. I posted a 9-second video of me doing a 230 kilo deadlift, saying that I identified as a woman and I'd just broken the British women's deadlift record. I had 19,000 followers on Twitter when I posted that, and it went bananas, went completely insane. It got over 500,000 views in the first day, and went on to do 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 4 million. And the following day after I posted it, I started getting contacted by mainstream media, Fox News, BBC, Sky News. Hey, we want to talk to you. We've just seen your post. We want to talk to you about this issue and find out why you did this. And it just kept going for weeks and weeks. Boom, Joe Rogan discovers it, talks about it on his show. We now have 20,000 followers, 30,000, 40, 50, 60, right? It's just going up and up and up.
Yep.
And then September 2019, so this is like 6-7 months after I posted it, I went out to California for the first time. I got invited to do the Rubin Report initially.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
Yep.
Lovely.
And I got invited also after that one to do the Joe Rogan Experience. And then the Daily Wire reached out to me when they were still in LA. I did Ben Shapiro's Sunday Special. It was the first time I met all the Daily Wire guys. So this is like September 2019.
I used to work with Ben. It's so
Yeah.
funny.
Okay. And then, I ended up staying 3 months in the USA.
Nice.
I thought I was only going to be there for about 2 weeks. I ended up staying 3 months. I just kept getting invited onto all these different shows,
Yeah.
podcasts. And at this point, people want to talk to me about more than just identifying as a woman and breaking the British Women's Deadly
Yeah.
Record.
They want your opinion and everything else.
Yeah, they want my take
Culture
on where society's going, culture, politics, what's going on with this whole gender issue and like this weird trans thing and so on. So I'm just there being me and unapologetically saying what I believe to be true and giving my
Yeah.
opinion. And it's resonating around the world. And then
That's because you're saying the quiet part out loud.
Yeah.
Right? It's like my tagline. I say the quiet part out loud. And suddenly you realize that kind of everybody agrees with you, but they're just too afraid to say it because they don't think anybody else is thinking it.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it was. So I found myself in this strange position where if you're thinking at this point, for over 12 years, I've been working really hard on my music and grinding and trying to get people to know me for my music.
Yep.
And then I put out a tweet.
It makes you, yeah.
And this single tweet does more damage and gets more reach than anything I'd ever created before. And
Yeah.
that was kind of weird to begin with because I'm like, hey, I'm a rapper. I want people to know me for my music.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a news reporter. I'm not a social commentator. I'm not a political pundit. I just put this thing out thinking it was kind of funny. So I almost kind of got dragged into
The universe had different
culture
plans.
war.
Yeah.
This whole culture war thing. I never sought out really to be a culture warrior beyond what I was doing with my music. And, God works in mysterious ways, as they say. And sometimes you don't know what you're going to get pulled into. But I know for me, due to how strongly I felt about some of these issues and the wider climate and things that were going on, I didn't just feel like, to me, being silent, by the way, the exact same thing happened during the whole COVID era. Like, me being silent, to me, it's not a neutral position.
Yeah.
Right.
It
Silence
felt
is
like-
complicity.
It is complicity.
Yeah.
Yeah, at least in the...
It's also violence.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird.
It's like you're being complicit in the status quo, right? You're saying it's okay for things to be as messed up as they are.
Do you know what it was? Is maybe I seem to have some ability to see where things are going before other people do.
Yeah.
It's the same reason why February, March 2020, I'm ringing the alarm. When they're talking 2 weeks to slow
Lockdown and all that crap. Yeah.
and everyone's, it's just 2 weeks, and I'm like, no, guys.
It's gonna be longer than that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Like I'm very.
I think that's the difference between you and a lot of quote-unquote influencers nowadays. They're not trendsetters. They're not, seeing things before they happen. They're simply following what
Followers, exactly.
people like you or people like me, I'm gonna pat myself on the back here, are saying, right? And then they regurgitate all these things and act as if they have original opinions.
Being early is not popular.
No, it's not. It's
never popular.
Mike Cernovich, another great example, right? He's always the early bird, and he's there, and people blast him. And Coulter, she saw Donald Trump, the rise of him. Alex Jones, he saw the rise of Donald Trump, and people were blasting them, making fun of them, and they don't get credit for it. That's a sad part, right?
Shout out! I'm gonna give a shout out to Mike Cernovich because he was one of the first big accounts that used to share my stuff a lot.
Yeah.
And this is going back to 2018.
And his wife are friends.
Shout out to
I've
him.
known them for a very long time. They're fantastic. He's fantastic. He's brilliant himself.
He's down to earth.
And totally.
Yeah.
And I love your tagline. Well, the new one, silence is violence.
Oh, that's not my time. That's not my time. That's definitely not my
It's a
time.
woke tag.
Yeah.
It was totally based.
It can be based. It can be. I mean, we should steal it. We should adopt it. We should culturally appropriate silence is violence.
Those who are too afraid to speak out,
Yeah.
Yeah, so man, it's just weird to think that that was all like 5.5, 6 years ago at this point. But yeah, here I am, still going.
Yep.
Still going.
Here you
strong.
are.
And you know what? There's so much more ahead. I want to ask you: are you worried about the fate of the UK, of the US? I mean, Trump has won, so I think
I think the
United
US is
States.
fine. It's better.
honestly, yeah.
Yeah, but what about Europe?
The
You know, UK. I mean, you're from there.
Yeah, I can speak on the UK. I won't speak on Europe as a whole, although I think many countries in Western Europe are on a similar trajectory and have been to the UK.
Absolutely.
The word that comes to mind when I think about the UK is stagnation.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people online in particular, oftentimes they're not even from the UK, but I think people make it out to be, people like to catastrophize and
Sure.
make things out to be even worse than they are. And the UK is certainly facing a ton of problems, and I don't think it's on a good trajectory. At the same time, it's not like it's melting down and it's all
No, of course not.
terrible and
It's not like the videos that Inevitable West puts out every single day, right?
Yeah,
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, some people want
Yeah.
to make it seem people can do the same with the U.S. parts of the U.S.
You can do it with any country.
You,
being honest.
you can with most for sure.
Like you see the pro-Ukraine accounts, they do that to Russia. They'll go to some poor part of Russia and they'll see some drug addict and they'll be like, "This is Moscow." It's like, well, it's not. This is one guy.
Yeah. At the same time, the UK there's nothing I see on the immediate horizon that's going to be the catalyst to put it on a better and more positive.
And that's the scary part, right?
Yeah.
It's like a slow decline.
It's a very, very, very slow decline, and part of me almost wonders if it would be better if it were a bit quicker and more obvious, because it would jolt people
Yep.
into some form of action.
Like we're seeing that in Germany right now, where unfortunately there have been a number of terrorist incidents,
Yeah.
but it's jolted the public into saying, "Hey, maybe we need a change now. We can't just be voting for the SPD and all these other green parties. We need to look at an alternative for Germany, AFD."
The thing that's
Literally.
interesting is, I say this all the time, and I mean it in multiple ways, but most people are conservative.
Yeah.
And
By
I don't.
nature, you're right.
Most people are conservative, and when I say that, I'm not strictly talking about politics.
Mhm.
I also mean that most people are averse to change,
Yes.
and
They like the status quo.
people,
It's what they know.
yes,
It's a devil,
people,
right?
people are used to what they know, so it can take. Sadly, things sometimes have to. You see this with individuals too,
Of course.
right? Sometimes things have to get really, really, really bad before
You have to
they
hit rock
finally-
bottom before you climb
Yeah,
back up.
before they finally make that change that needs to happen. And I don't want the UK and many other. I do love the UK. I've got a lot of love
Of
for
course
that
you do,
country,
yeah.
right? So I think sometimes when I have my criticisms of it, people think that I don't like it or that I'm anti-Western or whatever.
No, you're not.
I'm not. I want all of these countries to do well, and I want them to thrive because they're full of people, and I want human beings to thrive.
Absolutely.
But in the UK, there just needs to be more dynamism. There needs to be more hope.
Yeah.
There needs to be more optimism. The UK in general is a much more pessimistic country than the USA is. So one of the reasons why I'm always more optimistic about the USA is because Americans themselves are more optimistic.
They
Yeah.
are actually
And-
everywhere you go.
Yeah,
They're just like
and
a
if you think
Eastern-
about
It's
it,
the American dream.
yeah, if you think about it, like what even is hope? Hope is essentially believing that the future is going to be better than the present.
Yeah.
And in the UK right now, there's a lot of despair.
And
the
there's a lot of
opposite
keep calm and carry on.
Yeah, people don't generally have a feeling that the future is going to be better than the present. And when people collectively don't believe that, it's actually really dangerous for a society because it affects all sorts of things. People don't even want to bring children into the world
Right.
Wow.
if
Yeah,
they
they
don't think.
That's why they're on the decline.
If people don't believe the future is going to be better than the present,
Yeah.
then it is not totally irrational to think, well, why would I want to even reproduce them? Like, what's the point?
You're right.
If it's going to be worse for my kids than it was for me, and if my life has been worse than my parents by
Wow.
certain measures, if you think almost at all times, people have always believed, the future is going to be better than the present. Like,
Yeah, that's right.
It's almost a
But you're
given.
right. You're right, though, that in the UK, there's a general culture of cynicism
Cynicism.
that I think has become more predominant.
And what's hard about it, I'll tell you, it goes even deeper because what happens is that cultural pessimism also causes optimists to leave if they have the means.
Right.
Well, they come here.
Brain.
Okay?
They come here, literally.
Yes,
right?
like,
Yeah.
I
The
know
US.
Yeah, or the US.
Which
The
is
most-
like the US, yeah.
lots of the most optimistic and entrepreneurial and dynamic British people that I know left or are planning to leave.
Yep.
Yeah.
I know handfuls.
Because the culture and the policies in the politics, but also just the wider culture doesn't promote and celebrate that in the same way that, say, the US does or they do here in the UAE.
It's like when you're surrounded by a group of friends and they're all optimistic and they're all building something,
Mhm.
you feel, incentivized to do the same thing. You feel that optimism, you feel that positivity, right? But when you're in a room full of drug addicts who are sad and
Or
miserable,
gossipers.
or gossipers,
just
yeah,
constantly
people are just not happy with
Yeah.
their lives. They're dragging you down, and so you feel locked into that situation where everything seems hopeless.
Yeah, and people can resent you. I mean, it was kind of interesting. I mean, obviously, this is a very tiny sample. It's a microcosm. But I remember in was it May or June 2021? I remember when I said I was leaving the UK. It was kind of interesting, like reading the comments because some of them I remember reading them and I was like, this mentality
Is
of
why.
the type of person who's right. This is why I don't want to be here.
Yeah.
Because
That tall poppy syndrome.
that's all poppy syndrome,
Yes.
and it's just like, I don't want to be surrounded by this. Like I'm a talented person.
Yeah.
I'm an optimistic
You
person.
are. All of
I'm
you
a
are.
very positive person. I'm an entrepreneurial person. And I want to be in an environment that's surrounded by people where I can maximize that potential.
So what
That's right.
else
And
is
if that means that I need to leave my country, I will leave my country.
a fantastic decision, and hopefully it'll get to a place where soon enough, although I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. I think we can all agree.
At least for
And
Europe,
you
sure,
can
yeah.
go back and be comfortable.
This place is getting
But-
better, though. Let's be
Oh,
real.
it's amazing. Dubai is on an upward trajectory, no doubt about
It's
it.
so funny. Like,
Yeah.
people talk so positive. People who are actually in Dubai talk so positively about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But there are people who like wonder if we're on some sort of payroll.
I know they're asking.
And
We're
it's
not.
like,
Maybe
no,
we're not.
it's just good.
It just is
Like-
really good.
Other nations and cities should strive to be so good that people like
Absolutely.
promote it
Yep.
almost by accident
Yep.
because they genuinely like it.
And it's a positive place.
Yeah.
Where I mean,
Even New York City has an optimism still. I know so many people from New York, and they're they come here and they love the city, but they're like, New York is amazing too.
Yeah.
They
Of
keep
course
telling me
it
New York
is.
is amazing too, and I'm like, I believe you. I mean, it's got that optimism
but I
still.
have to tell
That's what's
you,
great about it.
something so unique about Dubai is you literally have everything at your fingertips. Unlike other parts of the world, of course, you have that access. But over here, I have brands that I love, for example, or places from the UK, from the US, from Asia.
Or even technology, right? I mean, the
Technology.
5090 came out
All
here.
here.
The week itself, I
Right.
picked one up.
For
Good luck
business.
getting one in Europe right now. It's still not out there. You know, it's like they're slow. They're behind. It's like, what's going on, guys? I mean, they're supposed to be like first world, continent, but Dubai gets it first.
I think part of the problem that's just going on in a lot of these Western countries is, in many ways and from many angles, I think they've become victims of their own success.
Yeah.
And I think that when you have been number one or close to it for a
It's
long
the guilt, is
time,
that what it is?
that exists. That's another part of it.
Self-hatred.
But I think some of
The social
that's
system,
the-
right? It's the social networks that
That's real. I also just think like the complacency.
right,
The whole like there's nowhere else to go mentality.
right.
Because the truth is, I mean, what was this place 50 years ago?
Fishing village,
Exactly.
literally a fishing village.
But this is the world is changing.
Yeah.
There are places which 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, they were not desirable. You wouldn't have wanted to live in them. They weren't developed enough. There were no opportunities and so on. And places improve over time.
That's
Yes.
true.
And so this century, end of this year, we're going to be at the end of the first quarter of this century. Okay, so we're going to have another 75
Yep.
years to go in this century, right? So we are to 2100 what 1925 was to 2000.
Yeah.
Right. Wow.
Think of it that way,
Goosebumps.
okay?
Yeah.
And think of how
different
much of the
it
world
is.
has changed from 1925 to 2000.
Mhm.
It's going to change at least that much between now and 2100.
Yep.
There are countries which are not even on someone's radar as a nice place to live or whatever.
Yep.
That 1925, who was worried about
Like
China?
Brunei or
China, right? China, like in 1925, who would have thought, China is going to be a world power, like a big superpower.
Look at Shenzhen, right? Look at Shenzhen, amazing.
Even a few
Yeah.
decades ago, people were like, all,
I said it's pretty amazing.
people were, maybe concerned about like Japan or something, and China just whoop, right? So right now, someone might think of India, and especially someone who's never been there, they might just think like, oh, India, like just poor country, da da da. Like they have like a mental image of it.
Yep.
And they're too short-sighted to think, okay, well, what about in 20 years? What about in 30 years? What about 50 years from now? India could be like, whoa, like people want to move.
Like they want to
literally migrate.
Like a lot of people are coming
Yeah.
to the Middle East, to places like the UAE and to Saudi Arabia now, right, and even Bahrain and Oman to an extent, because they see that growth. It's finally here, right? And they can't believe it. And when you tell them this on on X or anything, if they haven't traveled here, just think you're lying.
Yeah,
They'll
exactly.
hate on you. They'll attack you. I have to say, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has done an amazing job. Of course, look, his leadership and his tenure has been marred with also cynicism and people who are hating on him.
It's USA, Like,
No, even within the country because they have more.
they're USA funded.
morality.
Just so you know, a lot of them are USA
A lot of
funded.
USA,
Yeah.
But of course, he had to, for example, regarding his decision to change the monetary system to upgrade it. Of course, people were going to suffer. He removed things from the black market, but ultimately, his decision is going to help India long term.
It's the same thing with Argentina, right?
Be the
Malay
first,
was
right?
yeah,
It's
like
never possible.
Argentina was basically bankrupt. It had hyperinflation. Everything just looked bleak,
Yeah.
right? And Malay comes in and he's like, "We're getting rid of all your social benefits. We're going to cut all that stuff out, and yeah, you're going to suffer for like 1 year." But look at where they are now. I mean, they're on an upward trajectory to the point where even investment firms are saying it's actually a really good place to invest.
Yes, so I think this is, by the way, I think this is all going to be very good for humanity because I think
Yeah.
in the same way that capitalism and free markets allow competition, which causes quality improvements and even cost reductions, I see this happening globally in terms of actual nations and cities. I think we're at a relatively early stage of it,
Yeah.
but it's going to become much more apparent over the next few decades where different cities and nations are going to have to compete for the best people.
That's amazing.
Because people are going to be much more able and willing to travel, also due to the way that the economy is just changing and technology is changing. And so it's not going to just be like, oh, everybody, quote unquote, wants to go to the West. Everyone wants to go to the UK, Canada, USA.
Not everyone
So-
wants to.
It used to be the case.
But that's been the mentality.
That used to be the case. Yeah,
Our entire lives.
Like
that's been the
growing up, right? Growing up in Malaysia, everybody was like, "I'm going to move to the West. I'm going to move to the West."
Yeah.
Now it's like that's changed.
Yeah, there's going to be more people
That's
from the West.
amazing,
Like,
yeah,
I know people who have moved to Malaysia.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
And that's going to continue to happen. And I think overall this is good. I don't think it should just be like 3 or 4 countries or where everybody wants
No,
to
of
go
course
to.
not.
We're past that.
You want competition.
Yeah.
You want competition.
Yeah.
It breeds growth. I mean,
Yeah.
and Dubai gets it. That's why they're building. Like it's an incubator for a lot of like AI and crypto and all this stuff. It's because they realize they're going to have to compete
Yes.
because Saudi Arabia is not going to take the sleeping, and nor is Taiwan or Singapore or any of these other countries.
That's what's so interesting with the GCC is like in many ways in terms of the leaders and the way that they think and the way they actually understand these dynamics, they're actually a lot more progressive than the leaders in the West.
Yeah,
So it's kind of interesting. This is that.
and those guys are bogged down by bureaucracy and
Yeah,
regulations.
this is that weird juxtaposition between conservatism and progressivism because people think of these terms in like a very narrow and specific political sense.
Yeah.
But if you think progressive as actually forward thinking and seeing, okay, where is the world going?
Mhm.
So what's interesting, like Dubai is such a fascinating example to me because this was literally just like a patch of dirt, essentially, a few decades ago, right? Like there's it's pretty hostile climate, particularly in the summer.
It is. Yeah.
There's not a huge amount of natural beauty. Okay, you're by the water here, but there's not. It's not like California or even like in England where you've just got just tons of natural beauty and forests and lakes and all of this. So they've had to like create an environment that will attract people. 85% of people in the city are not from here.
That's
They
true.
moved from other places, from India, from Pakistan, from Malaysia, from the UK, from the US, from Canada, from Russia, and they're coming in here by the millions.
Yes.
And the leaders here know we need to attract and then maintain
Mhm.
those people. Whereas in the West, it's like, well, people would just happen to be born here.
Yep.
And like they're not going to go anywhere, so why do we even need to do anything for them or even make it good for them? Let's just let everything slide. Like we'll just sit here and bicker and shout at each other, but nothing actually
and they get
improves.
lost in nonsense like net zero, right?
Mhm.
The whole let's cut down methane emissions from cows. It's just
Although,
No, there's more nonsense. Like,
There
bro, for the
is.
past decade, you've literally been debating how many genders there are for a decade.
oh
Yeah,
my God,
for
there
decades.
Wasted
is.
10 years.
Thank you.
in
10
Germany,
years.
right? 10 years, and in Germany they are continuing to deindustrialize.
Yeah.
Deindustrialization is going to be the death of Germany unless the AfD wins. They're going to turn things around. But that was the case with America, where Biden was deindustrializing the United States. He got rid of a lot of industries. He pushed them out to Mexico because it's cheaper. He got rid of the Keystone XL pipeline, which would have helped so many communities in that region, right? And Trump is back, fortunately, and he's bringing life back to those areas. He's bringing people back to those towns that were previously dead, and Europe needs that. But unfortunately, with the current leadership, it just doesn't have
But I
that.
have to tell you, net zero, I agree with all of what you're saying, this whole gender debate, which is bonkers, which is why I love private homeschooling, honestly, for my daughter. Although I think Dubai schooling is excellent too, from what I hear. Something that does concern me, though, is the threat of an EMF attack destabilizing the grid.
Okay.
And I've spoken about this for close to a decade, I think. It's still a very real threat, and it just boggles my mind that the U.S., for example, their grid hasn't been hardened enough.
Yeah.
So just something.
It's old, right? It's old, and that's where Elon comes in. That's where Elon comes in with Doge. They're going to fix all of this stuff. I mean, right now they're working together with the FAA to upgrade all of their their towers because they are like literally 50 years old. That's how insane it is.
So I want to say, based on what you've been saying, I think that would you say you're generally still optimistic, considering Europe still the worst is yet to come in certain parts,
Optimistic for
And-
who?
the future of humanity. I guess for the next 20 years.
Okay.
Are you generally optimistic about the trajectory of society and culture overall, or do you think there's more optimism for you based in the East versus the West? Could you kind of, if you can, quantify it in a way?
Wow. I think that, gosh, it's a good question. It's a good question. I'm very optimistic for some people.
Okay.
Very pessimistic for others.
I feel
I
the same
completely
way.
understand. We completely understand.
Yeah,
Those who don't understand what's coming and
Yeah.
how to get out of that kind of box and call the matrix.
Yeah.
Everything's for it.
yeah, pretty much.
They're stuck in a matrix for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, it's hard to speak in. I don't even.
Understandably so.
Yeah, it's not even really about nations to me. It's
I
more
think
about
you're
like
right.
It's about people.
mentality
Exactly.
and personality type and how individuals or families or perhaps even
Absolutely right.
communities how they maneuver.
I
I think
think
the world is going to get more I think it continues to get more complicated.
it does. Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to each individual person. If you're born in, say, into poverty in, someplace in Europe,
Yeah.
right, that doesn't have much hope.
Yeah.
I think you need to get out of that bubble. If you're trapped in there, right, you need to see the world outside, and you need to see what's good for you and what's good for your family. That's why I know a lot of Europeans who are moving here or moving to America because they are putting their family first ahead of their whatever surroundings they're in.
Yeah, I think, and this has always been true to some degree, but perhaps more in the future than in the past. I think that mindset may become a much greater differentiator
Mm-hmm.
than, let's say, social class.
I think you're right.
Yes,
I think it's
Definitely.
really
because you can be rich and still
Yeah, I think it's more about there.
Millionaires, for example, crypto made. Bitcoin specifically.
Yep.
I think 90% of crypto is scams anyway.
Yep.
But Bitcoin is
99.
99%.
Thank you, exactly. Bitcoin is the only true.
and Doge.
And Doge.
Doge.
I have to say Doge as well, of course, absolutely. I didn't. If you don't mind, I want to ask you something else. I wanted to ask you about this before, but I think now it's a good time.
Good segue.
Considering that you've been, you decided to leave the UK, 2021, right? I think it was what you said. And you were seeing all the comments like, yeah, this is exactly why I want to leave, this kind of mentality. You've been attacked, obviously, also. Cancel culture, have you ever felt cancel culture, personally?
Yeah, I mean, I've had suspensions before.
Okay.
I've had videos deleted. I've had tweets and Instagram posts taken down. But
Is
to
it
me,
more
that's
you?
not. To me, that's not cancel culture. To me, that's just censorship and defamation.
Censorship, yeah.
Okay.
Cancel culture.
I don't worry about cancel culture at all. I believe you get canceled by your own audience.
Okay. Okay, that's really
My
wonderful.
audience is never going to cancel me.
Amazing. I don't
The
think they
more
have
authentic I am, the more they love me. So
the key. On
because I'm
you're
not,
so right.
the only way I could get canceled is if I become a fraud.
You're so Zuby.
Yeah.
Thank you. So many people who have built their entire lives, their entire platform on being a certain way, certain values, certain mores, and then they go and do the opposite.
Yeah.
They go and do what the other side does.
It's a hypocrisy. People hate it. People hate hypocrisy.
Because you know what, you don't trust it. Snake-like behavior.
Of course not.
Completely. And so I'm just wondering though, this whole, I guess cancel culture can be a good thing when it's done correctly. Although on the other side,
It's
trying
keeping
to
you in
cancel
line.
you, right?
It keeps, well, not you, but like a lot of people.
Accountability.
Yeah, accountability is important to your audience and so on. On the flip side of it is that you don't want to be audience captured, in which case your audience is driving your opinions and you have none of your own.
Absolutely.
And we see this a lot on X,
Yeah.
on YouTube, on anywhere, really.
On everything.
On everything, yeah.
It's a constant danger of being any type of public figure.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, you don't want to pander. You got to be true to yourself, right? At the end of the day, you want to. I mean, if your fans are your fans, then they will appreciate you for your opinions, and you're not going to be saying things that only you're only saying it to appease them.
Exactly.
100%.
I think that's what separates the real people from the frauds, and people can tell.
We need more
Hopefully they
real.
can.
I think they can. I mean, you're popular, and I'm a follower,
It's fine.
Thank you.
and so I've always followed your work, and I think you've always been true to yourself. So
We appreciate
keep being that.
Thank you. Thank you. I was going to say I'll try, but it's more like
It's
I won't
natural.
try. It's just
You won't try. You just be.
I'll
Right?
just
You
be
just
me.
be.
I'll just be me.
Exactly.
Zuby, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
This was awesome. We're looking forward to seeing you more often. And I think that, especially after this, I agree with you. There is a mixed bag of optimism and cynicism, but it is more based on people and mindset, less so on the kind of, boundaries and the borders in the countries, nations themselves.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you guys. Really nice to meet you both.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So